So I got to ask you, how are you feeling this morning? It being flawed and tainted and planted. So is Florida basically killing an innocent man?
Yes.
What about the religious aspect of it, Ed?
Like I told you before, that's kind of personal.
Have you just yes or no? Have you studied Satanism?
Yes, I have.
Are you a worshiper of the devil?
No comment.
Number 3, Oscar Ray Bolin. Bolin was born on January 22, 1962 in Portland, Indiana. His family consisted of laborers and carnival workers. He had experienced horrific hurt at the hands of his parents, who used to beat him when he was a child, and his mother once walked him to a school bus on a leash. It wasn't surprising that Bolin grew up frequently getting into trouble with the law during his youth, but the crimes committed in his youth were only a precursor to much darker, devilish pursuits, which eventually led to his conviction. On January 25, 1986, 25-year-old Natalie Blanche Hawley finished work and locked up the store for the night with a colleague. She left the store around 1:30 a.m. and headed to her car. Her body was found hours later by a morning jogger. On November 5, 1986, 17-year-old Stephanie Collins, a Chamberlain High School student, disappeared after finishing her shift at a drugstore. On December 5, 1986, her body was found wrapped in sheets and towels. The same day, 26-year-old Terry Lynn Matthews also went missing. Her body was located later that day in some woods, wrapped in a white sheet. The police knew they had a serial slayer on their hands, and only fate led them to connecting the dots and finding a connection between Bolin and these victims. In 1983, Bolin had married his girlfriend, Cheryl Hafner.
You've been here 28 years.
I've been locked up 28 years, since December 9, 1987. And in confinement.
And explain what that's like.
Imagine spending 28 years in this room. There's no way to describe it. I don't know how you would expect someone to feel. I mean, if they told you tomorrow you're dying, how would you feel? But I'm at peace with myself. I mean, as far as it's my release. We all die, but it's knowing your exact date and time that's hard to deal with.
So I got to ask you, how are you feeling this morning?
A little numb.
In 1987, Bolin and 2 other men committed a crime together. Afterward, Bolin attempted to slay his victim with a gun, but the gun jammed. He let the woman go along a highway in Pennsylvania. Bolin was captured and sentenced to 22 to 75 years in prison. In 1989, Bolin and Cheryl Hafner divorced, with Hafner remarrying soon after. She told her new husband that Bolin had told her about committing multiple slayings. Hafner's new husband then called a tip line and implicated Bolin. More witnesses then came out to testify against him, including his younger half-brother and a cousin. Hafner testified that she had been with Bolin before he kidnapped Holly and had helped him dispose of some evidence. Bolin's half-brother testified that he watched Bolin beat Matthews and attempt to drown her with a garden hose. Bolin's cousin confessed to aiding Bolin in abducting 30-year-old Deborah Diane Stowe outside a convenience store in Greenville, Texas in 1987, who lost her life in the attack. Texas prosecutors declined to seek an indictment in the case because Bolin was already charged with multiple slayings in Florida. Bolin was found guilty and was sentenced to the gallows in July 1991 for the slaying of Holly. He later received another capital punishment sentence for the slaying of Collins and received a third one for the slaying of Matthews. Bolin was put down by lethal injection at 10:16 p.m. Eastern on January 7, 2016. He was the first person to be put down and under in the United States in 2016. His last meal consisted of a ribeye steak, a baked potato, salad, garlic bread, lemon meringue pie, and Coca-Cola, a befitting end to a violent criminal who had been the devil's minion in human form.
So you're saying you didn't murder these women?
No.
You didn't murder Natalie Hawley?
No.
Stephanie Collins?
No. My punishment's over. I've been here 28 years now. I'm tired.
Terry Lynn Matthews?
No. I didn't know him. I'd never seen him. Never met him. A lot of support outside. That's made it a little easier. Still, it's very difficult to spend. I've had a lot of support. A lot of people love me and care about me. 28 years in a room like this.
It being flawed and tainted and planted. So is Florida basically killing an innocent man?
Yes.
Number 2, Richard Ramirez. Ricardo Richard Leyva Munoz Ramirez was born on February 28, 1960, was dubbed the Night Stalker, the Valley Intruder, and the Walk-In Slayer, whose crime spree took place in California between June 1984 and August 1985. Ramirez's childhood is considered an influence for his crimes. Frequently hurt by his father, Ramirez began developing gruesome and macabre interests in his early and mid-teens from his older cousin, Miguel Mike Ramirez, who also taught him some of the military skills that he would go on to use during his year-long slaying spree. Ramirez also cultivated a strong interest in Satanism and the occult. By the time he had left his home in Texas and moved to California at the age of 22, he had begun frequently using cocaine, a habit to support which he committed burglaries regularly, taking people's lives in the process. On April 10, 1984, Ramirez took the life of Mei Lung, a 9-year-old Chinese-American girl, in the basement of his apartment building in San Francisco. The slaying was not linked to Ramirez until 2009, when his DNA was matched to a sample obtained at the crime scene. Thus was the beginning of a nightmare playing out in the streets of Los Angeles in the shadows of the nights. By the end of his criminal career, this infamous serial criminal had taken the lives of 18 victims.
Have you just yes or no? Have you studied
Yes,
Satanism?
yes, I have.
Are you a worshiper of the devil?
No comment. They are a product of the times, and these are bloodthirsty times.
What do you want the world to know about you?
The world has been fed many lies about me.
Did you kill 13 people?
It would be improper for me to comment on my LA conviction. I don't care to explain that. Let the quote stand for itself.
Are you appealing these because you say you're innocent? You didn't kill 13 people?
That is correct.
You didn't kill 13 people.
Known to authorities. Interestingly, Ramirez had been leaving a slew of evidence in his wake in the commitment of each crime, which would be later used to connect him to each of his victims. It seemed like he was unbothered by the possibility of getting caught, and in a way, he was actually leaving proof of his presence in the face of law enforcement as a way to mock them in their helplessness. But it seemed that Ramirez's time was up, and the adage that what goes around comes around was about to come true, when he tried to commit another crime to satisfy his beastly urges. This time he chose his own doom when on August 24, 1985, Ramirez traveled 76 miles south of Los Angeles in a stolen orange Toyota to Mission Viejo, to the home of James Romero Jr. Romero's son. 13-year-old James Romero III happened to be awake. He observed Ramirez through his bedroom window, went to wake his parents, and Ramirez fled the scene. James raced outside and noted the color, make, and style of the car, as well as a partial license plate number. Romero contacted the police with this information, believing James had chased away a thief. Erickson gave a detailed description of the assailant to investigators, and police obtained a cast of Ramirez's footprint from the Romero house. The stolen Toyota was found abandoned, from which they recovered his intact fingerprint. The print was positively identified as belonging to Ramirez, courtesy of fingerprint filing which took birth only a month before Ramirez was born. Now the authorities had a face and a name to go with the infamous Night Stalker. On August 29, 1985, law enforcement officials decided to release a mugshot of Ramirez from a 1984 arrest for auto theft to the media. August 30, 1985, Ramirez took a bus to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother, unaware that he had become the lead story. After noticing a group of elderly Hispanic women fearfully identifying him as El Matador, literally the slayer in Spanish, Ramirez saw his face on the front page of the newspaper La Opinión, with a headline calling him Invasor Nocturno, and fled the store in a panic. The hunter had officially become the hunted, but how he was caught and handed over to the police was legendary.
And on my pending case here in San Francisco,
Why?
because of my appeal.
But you're right in there now as far as everybody else is concerned.
Serial killers do on a small scale what governments do on a large one. Even psychopaths have emotions if you dig deep enough. But then again, maybe they don't. I'll tell you what, I gave up on love and happiness a long time ago. Again, it would be improper for me to comment in any regard to that question. People in this day and age are brainwashed and programmed like a computer at being nothing more than puppets. A Satanist admits to being evil.
Do you admit to being evil, Richard?
We are all evil.
Number 1. Carol Cole. Carol Cole was born in Sioux City, Iowa. While his father was away fighting the Second World War, his mother had several affairs and sometimes took Cole along to her rendezvous, threatening to beat him if he told his father. Vesta was emotionally hurtful to Cole and dressed him as a girl. At school, he was teased about his girl's name by his peers. Apparently, his crime spree began at the tender age of 8, when he retaliated against one of his classmates, Duane, by drowning him in a lake in Richmond, California. The passing was regarded as an accident by authorities, up until Cole confessed it many years later in an autobiography he wrote in prison. According to him, he was primed. He had made the mental commitment he was going to get even with his mother, which became his obsession. Cole spent time in various mental hospitals over the next 3 years, where his pretty graphic, violent fantasies were recorded by his psychiatrist, and he was eventually diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. He eventually married, but that ended prematurely when he was arrested for arson. Upon his release from prison, Cole attempted to strangle an 11-year-old girl in Missouri. He was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison. He made the same attempt against 2 other women and eventually ended up in a mental hospital. It's amazing how much he could get away with in lieu of his mental illness. Cole's first victim as an adult was Essie L. Buckley, whom he had picked up in a San Diego tavern on May 7, 1971. With her, his fantasies took a dark turn and turned into a reality. Cole descended into the depths of hell, taking the lives of a number of innocents with him. Even the people who were closest to him in his life were not spared. In July 1973, Cole married barmaid Diana Faye Younglove Paschal, who was also an alcoholic. They argued and fought frequently, and Cole regularly went off on his own for days at a time. He would commit slayings while he was away, including one woman he allegedly cannibalized to a degree. In September 1979, Cole strangled Paschal to her demise, but he was cleared of all charges in her passing, which was deemed natural. His crimes eventually caught up with him, and he had to face the piper. On April 9, 1981, Cole was convicted of 3 of the slayings committed in Texas. He was sentenced to life at the Huntsville prison. In 1984, Cole's mother passed away and his attitude was reported to have changed. In February 1984, Cole was extradited to Nevada, where he was tried and convicted for the strangulation passings of 2 women and was handed down the penalty sentence. Though he had confessed to a total of 35 slayings, he was put down in 1985 for taking the lives of at least 15 women and 1 boy by strangulation between 1947 and 1980. Cole met his end through lethal injection at Nevada State Prison on December 6, 1985.
Why not fight for your life?
I just don't care to.
What about the religious aspect of it, Ed?
Like I told you before, that's kind of personal.
It is the question.
For what I did, yes, I think I deserve to die. The last couple of days have been real emotionally, not mentally drained, not emotionally drained.
Cole's execution is now less than 8 hours away. From the Nevada prison in Carson City, Mark Fierro.
That's all we have for you, folks. Join us next time.